What is up, everybody? Welcome back to yet another Mushoku Mondays. We are on Volume 6, Chapter 5 of our trek through the Mushoku Tensei Jobless Reincarnation novel series. As per usual, thank you guys so much for your ongoing support, watching all the videos, liking, sharing it out there, being a part of our premieres every single Monday at around 7 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. It's so great for you guys to be there, and it's so much fun talking with y'all. But yes, I will say after going through Chapters 5, 6, and I'm almost done with 7, I can honestly say pretty on point with what sort of happened, but dang if things didn't resolve completely different. There's like placement of certain things, who was involved in the final conclusion. It just seems like they decided to kind of shift things around, which honestly, now that I think about it, doesn't make much sense that the anime adapted it that way, but we'll get into it as we get to that part. But yes, let's jump into it. Opening up Chapter 5, just to kind of remind people, we currently have Rudeus is inside of this magic circle that Pax has trapped him inside of. And of course, we have to have yet another Cribs episode. Hi, I'm Rudeus, and I used to be a shut-in. Currently, I'm checking out a free apartment in Shirone Kingdom. There's no security, no rent. It's a one-room apartment that provides no meals and doesn't have much for natural lighting. There's no bed provided, and a lack of toilet means you have to resort to the old-fashioned ways of pissing your pants. So living here for an extended period of time will no doubt result in serious illness. At least it's free. It's also reassuringly secure in its construction. Please, see for yourself how durable the barrier is. As long as you're inside it, magic is nullified. Even if a ranked adventurer like me hits it as hard as they can, it won't budge. Even if you're a masterful escape artist, there's no way to get out. Okay. This is where he stops himself. I know, that's the second time I've used that joke. At this point, Rudeus has spent an entire day trying to remove the barrier. Pounding on the wall, scrubbing the magic circle, leaping up towards the ceiling, which is 4 meters above him. All magic that he used kind of fizzled before they did anything. He even tried the whole shonen protagonist trope where he powers him up and uses so much mana that it destroys the barrier, like they typically do in shonens. But unfortunately, it didn't work. He describes the effects of the barrier almost as if you're trying to use a lighter and there's a strong wind going through. The gas was there, the spark was there, it's just nothing happened. There was no fire. Or he said maybe it's more like the fire appeared, but it was snuffed out immediately. At this point, he started getting very impatient. He's realizing at this point that he can't get out of here on his own. And he thought that if the worst came to pass, Roxy would end up showing up and end up falling into Pax's trap. And at that point, he would be able to do nothing about it. It came to the point that if Roxy or even Edis showed up, all he would be able to do is just scream for them to leave him behind. Which, honestly, let's take a moment here to realize what he just said. That he himself, if Roxy or Edis showed up, he would plead for them to go, run, leave him behind. Like, this is literally, I get this point, how far we're into his new life, it makes perfect sense. But again, contrast to this to pretty much himself when he first arrived, he probably would have easily been more self-preservation than anything. But again, he cares for Roxy, he cares for Edis. He even started getting really dark in his own head, and the idea that, well, now that Pax has Rudeus, somebody he thinks is a better lure for Roxy, what is he gonna do to Lilia? Does he no longer need her? Is he gonna, get rid of her, kill her? But he wanted to believe that everything was gonna be okay. He'd done what the man god told him to do. And he caught himself saying, perfectly. But he's like, no, now that I think about it, the man god only said Aisha and Lilia would be saved. He hadn't mentioned anyone else. And this is what I was mentioning in the last video's impressions. It was like, yeah, if you think about it, what about everybody else? All the man god said was Lilia and Aisha would be saved. And it's like this, that's that whole thing of like, because he's so vague and because he's manipulative in a way, Rudeus doesn't know what the full picture is. Again, as I was kind of speculating last episode, man god said only Lilia and Aisha would be saved. There's no telling if Edis shows up, she'll be killed. Rizard shows up, he'll be killed. Doubt it. Roxy shows up, she'll be killed. And yes, technically Rudeus himself could be killed. Again, we're at the point now where Rudeus is already starting to question if the man god even needs Rudeus. Was the whole point in this whole travel to the west was just to get Rizard here? Was Rizard his focus? And, you can go even further in the idea that now that he's saved Aisha and Lilia, maybe now they're in the position that he could speak to them. The possibilities are starting to scramble in Rudeus' head, and I really do like that willingness of the writer to really get into that mindset of, are you being used, are you following things properly, and do you see the bigger picture? But no, he thinks, what if the man god gave the advice to gain his trust? It would be difficult to think that he would word it in a way that would be deceptive. Even still, negative thoughts were just filling his head. He had to get out of there. At this point, Rudeus felt exhausted. It had been a long time since he used this much mana. Again, we gotta remember, this entire travel, Rudeus made a point of not to use his mana, not to train any magic, because he wanted to make sure that he had enough mana always reserved in case something really terrible happened. So this is the first time he's just been expending mana like crazy. Probably ever since he first transported to the Demon Continent. There was no light, no clock, no sense of time at all. He was starving. He was kind of assuming at this point that Pax had completely forgotten about him. Like, he's got a pet now, and he's never going to feed it. But he thought maybe that was Pax's plan. Starve Rudeus so much that he whittles down to nothing. At this point, he starts to think about his past life and escape tactics and movies and stuff like that to figure out maybe a possible way of getting out. You know, feigning sick so that the prisoner comes down, you knock him out, and you get the keys, that kind of stuff, which obviously none of that's going to work. He even thought about pledging loyalty to Pax. He's thinking in his own head, truth is, Pax, that Roxy's been getting on my nerves for a long time now, boss. And actually, I know where her parents are. What do you think about doing it in front of them, boss? He's thinking to himself, man, this guy's a moron. He'd probably fall for it. But then suddenly, Rudeus hears some footprints. Rudeus hears some footprints. Yes, Zanoba. Zanoba shows up. I gotta think of a voice. I need a voice. Aha. Just as Ginger told me. A man glided down the steps. Rudeus immediately knew that it was somebody of the royal family just based on his grandiose outfit. It was black with gold embroidery. He appeared to be 20, face similar to Pax, but more oval shaped, and glasses were resting on his protruding cheekbones. He was taller and thinner. In other words, your typical book nerd anime character. I am Shirone Kingdom's third prince, Zanoba Shirone. I just realized, yes, I know in the Japanese pronunciation it's actually Shirone. I don't know why. I guess it's because it's not technically Japanese names in this world. And so when they speak it in Japanese, they don't pronounce it in the same way. But I'm probably going to still say Shirone. Rudeus realized this must be Pax's older brother. Rudeus says, a pleasure to make your acquaintance. I'm Rudeus Grey Rat. What brings you here today? At this point, Zanoba hoists up this bag in his hands. It's Rudeus's bag. Carefully extracts something from within it, the Rougeard figure. Where did you get this demon figurine? Tell me. I heard from Ginger that you brought it with you. Rudeus feared that obviously being seen carrying this would be like carrying a false god idol. The Roxy figurine was a little bit different because it didn't have like the demonic characteristics. But obviously the Rougeard figure was a little more obvious because, I mean, it had the jewel on the forehead. So it was quickly identifiable. I picked it up while traveling the Demon Continent. Aha! I knew it. It must have been a demon that made this. All right. Where exactly did you acquire this? What did the person selling it look like? Do you know who made this? His eyes were gleaming. He was obviously very invested. Who knows? I just saw it and I liked it, so I bought it. I don't know the specifics about it. What? His face turned intimidating. These were the eyes of somebody who has killed before. Oh yeah, merchant told me something about it when he sold it to me. He said that if you have this figurine in your possession, you'll be safe from even Superd attacks. Just show that figurine to them and say, Reserved loves children, Reserved loves children. And suddenly that Superd will act like your old friends from 10 years ago. They'll sling their arms around you and say, hey bro, and stuff like that. Zanoba's like, oh, yes? What else? Everybody's like, you'll be blessed with perfect, healthy, and children. Also, you'll get really good at swordplay. No, not that. What you're telling me is that someone who is deeply involved with the Superd tribe made this. Rudeus thinks to himself, yeah, that's technically true, but though Rudeus wasn't really sure what the connection he was making. It seems like there's a strong possibility that it was made by the same person. At this point, Zanoba places this figurine on the ground. And then he pulled the Roxy figurine out of his bag and he places it on the ground before plumping down behind it. This demon figurine was discovered 5 years ago in the markets. He put his hand on his chin and gazed affectionately at the figurine. Rudeus at this point notes that yes, this region sort of condemns the possession of demonic figurines. That's because the influence of the Milis region kind of stretches out this far. He assumed that Zanoba was looking to condemn the creator, but he didn't seem angry. Zanoba goes on to explain that this figurine was discovered and purchased by Pax, obviously knowing that it looked like Roxy, the court magician that they had at the time. Of course, Rudeus notes really quickly, wait, you said at the time. To which, yeah, Zanoba acknowledges, yeah, I mean, she left. She did not want to tolerate Pax's unwanted advances. Rudeus asks him, how was your brother getting friendly with her? And Zanoba says, getting friendly? He stole her underwear and peeked into her as she was bathing. Rudeus thought to himself, how awful. People like that should be punished. Like, smash their computer with a bat. He should be forced to live under the same roof as a young miss with a killer punch and stripped naked, thrown into a cell, have cold water tossed on him. Shoot, I'd even conjure up an earth lance and slam it into his rear. One thick and shaped like a traffic cone. Seriously though, did he think that was okay? I mean, That's so unforgivable. But then Rudeus catches himself in his own doofy little mindset and thinks to himself, wait, did Roxy quit being my tutor because I did those things? Which I think is an interesting thought, because we know why Roxy left. We know why that whole situation happened, but it's kind of odd. This is the first time it's really dawning on him, like, did I push her away? But he decided to leave that whole depressing conversation behind him, at this point nodding with a solemn face. Zanoba says, I have a weakness for figurines. I collect them from all over the world. This is the only one in my possession whose makers and origin I don't know. I know it was made of rock and chiseled down, but it's harder and heavier than the stonework used by the dwarves. No one in this world has the technique to chisel a sculpture this elaborate from such hard rock. For example, look at her staff. Even for the most adept dwarf, carving something this precise in stone is incredibly difficult. Rudeus at this point thought about the trial and error that he went through just to make something as complex as that staff. He used the same method for when he made the spear for the Berserk figure. It required a fair amount of mana, concentration, and time. It took a day to produce a centimeter of work. At this point, Rudeus is just happy that his work's being praised. Zanoba continues, something that's incredible being sold for 5 Astra coins, I would have paid 100. It bothers me that those living in the streets are so unrefined and boorish. They can't appreciate its value. Zanoba goes on explaining how he figures this was made by a demon because the price was so low. Technically, if someone of the Mill's Faith Temple Knights knew someone was in this possession of this, they'd be executed. Even a prince of Shirone. Yes, pretty much acknowledging the fact that even Zanoba having this is bad. And this whole time, Zanoba's been looking for its creator. While he doesn't want to get involved with the demon god worshipping, he still wanted to speak to them. And as time went on that he had this figurine, that's when Lilia appeared. Just one day after Roxy left. And Rudeus realizes, oh, that's why they missed each other. After Pax took her into custody, Zanoba said that she was carrying a box that seemed special. This is weird. Why was this different in the anime? Zanoba then brought out the box and opened it up. There was something tucked within the folds of fabric that he pulled away. It was a pendant, hand-carved, but not by practiced hands. We all know what that pendant is. Rudeus points it out, and Zanoba says, the pendant? It's irrelevant. And he goes and places it down on the bag. Then Zanoba removed the cloth that was inside the box and held it up in a perfect triangle, or a baseball diamond. Rudeus immediately knew what he had in his hands. It was Ponsu. Without a shadow of a doubt, it belonged to his god, Roxy, the object of his worship. Zanoba says, Lilia said that she was trying to send these to you for your 10th birthday. But there's a little confusion that happens here. They think that the pendant inside the box is camouflage. Like, this is the thing that you open up and you go, oh, this is to carry a pendant. No, that the real treasure in this box was the Ponsu. And they thought that Lilia thought that it would be a little bit too embarrassing and weird to send a box with just Ponsu in it. So she added the pendant inside of there to camouflage the Ponsu and sent it that way. Which at this point I'm thinking to myself, Poor Sylphie. Poor Sylphie, like, put all this effort into carving this pendant, which I'm sure we'll eventually find out about that whole story, but she made this pendant to send with the Ponsu, you know, having Lilia send it, and they just think, oh no, it's a Ponsu that's important in the box. At this point, Rudeus was shocked as he realized the Ponsu, they had been washed. I cannot believe I'm going to say this. Roxy's extra virgin olive oil was cleaned away, so they had lost their divinity. God was no longer nestled in those Ponsu. In her place resided Lilia's sincerity. Rudeus held back tremors in his voice. So what about these Ponsu? At this point, Zanoba goes into this long explanation, holding this figurine in his hand, noting its pose, the slight exposure of skin, her arm being thrusted out, the slight erotic look of it. He knows that with the look of it, you realize how thin this girl is. Then he shows the back of it and shows how you can kind of slightly see the outline of her butt, a small butt. He's like, normally in real life, you probably wouldn't find that sexy. But he knows that based on it being this baggy robe, it's exactly what makes it sexy. He says it's the way the butt is presented that makes you want to see more. And he says, and you can do exactly that. He realized you could unclasp the part of the robe and it comes apart. You can see her innocent form clad in nothing but underwear. But not only that, but the girl's not wearing a bra. A good decision for somebody like Roxy, since she has such a small chest. That's when the genius part is finally realized, that this figure actually has 3 arms. That when the robe comes together, there's an extra arm that extends out with the staff. But when you remove the robes, the arm goes with it, and you reveal that she has another arm underneath covering up her chest. It's genius! Truly genius! And I really badly wanted to buy this figure. I really badly wanted to buy this figure, but that would have been really good to have when I actually do this video for this particular part, but that's not just it. That was not the whole picture. Looking at her from the left side, when she wears the robe, the line of her back is curved and her legs are stretched out in front. But when you take it off, for some reason she's slumping forward, almost as if she's trying to hide her chest or her body. And now that you've seen that, look at her face. When she had her robe on, she had a dignified look. But now, she looks like she's desperate to hide how shy she is, right? The person that made the figure knew that the impression would change based on having the robes or not. That's how they knew they could leave the expression the same, because it fits both. Zanoba acknowledged this is an object of most exquisite quality. Certainly there's aspects that couldn't be compared to the nuanced skill of the dwarves. You might call it an amateur at most. And yet this figure is in a realm far beyond the crude dwarves could ever hope for. Rudeus didn't miss a single word. Most would be flabbergasted by that spill, but he hung on every single word. Rudeus, being the creator of the figurine, was satisfied with this review. The only thing that was missing from the conversation was why was she covering her chest? Rudeus spoke out. The mole under her armpit, it's gone. Zanoba admitted that he shaved it off. He thought it would lower its beauty. Rudeus was froze by those words, and his eyes widened. You shaved it off? Yes. So, you know something about this figurine. Rudeus ignored him, and he asked him to turn the figurine around. Zanoba's like, wait, no, answer my question first. And Rudeus said, just said turn it first. Zanoba kind of let out like a small little whine, like, and then he just kind of spun it around. Rudeus said, stop, right there. Now look at it again. It was at the point in where the mole should have been. Rudeus says, look at where the hand is positioned. Zanoba's like, what are you talking about? Don't ask, just look. Rudeus knew he was probably annoying Zanoba with the tone of his voice, but still, Zanoba complied. He was quite the serious type. Can you tell that she's not quite covering it? Can you tell her hand doesn't quite reach it? Zanoba finally understood why she was hiding her chest. He finally understood that in a world where the concept of 18 plus wasn't a thing, I chose not to reveal Roxy's modern, adorable chest. Do you understand why she's holding her chest and not hiding the mole? Zanoba says, no way, it can't be. He was trembling all over. The reason was clear. Since you can't see her nips, the next thing that stood out for her was the mole. He also had her emphasizing her embarrassment at not being able to hide both. The sexiest aspect of the figurine was the mole itself. Zanoba was broke. He realized he defiled the creation, foaming out of his mouth. Everybody says, it's just a mole, I can easily add it back. Anyways, what does it have to do with the pantsu? And Zanoba's like, oh, the pantsu are the same ones the figure. Which, yes, Rudeus acknowledges, yeah, I technically made the pantsu on the figure using the pantsu that I stole from her as a reference. And then Rudeus, being Rudeus, goes on to explain that yes, technically Roxy had 4 other pair of pantsu. He says the details of each one of the pantsus were a little bit different. She was quite fashion conscious. Again, probably more playing into the idea that Roxy always wants to feel grown up, I would assume. So Rudeus tries to steer the conversation. So, what did you want to know about it? I mean, what is it about? Zanoba says, so you, my lord, was the one that made it. He was now groveling before him. As expected of the pupil of the Water King magician Roxy. You made this with magic, didn't you? Rudeus thinks to himself, that's Miss Roxy to you. How dare you use her name without a proper title? Zanoba went on to explain that he would love to call him master. That he's been looking at this figurine every single day. At this point, scurrying across the floor like an insect as he spoke, smacking against the barrier, trying to kiss at Rudeus's feet. Why is this barrier here? Who put this here, master? Allow me to pay my respects to your godlike hands, please. And that was how Rudeus gained a creepy disciple. In his mind, he's thinking about how he's technically met people like this online before in his previous life. People that he wouldn't even call friends. Now he understood this was the faces people were making behind their screens. The man god probably planned this. Meeting this guy, forming a bond with him, lending his powers to escape. The end, Rudeus thought, was in sight. Rudeus says, my people, there should be a magic crystal in this room maintaining the barrier. Destroy it. Zanoba says, understood, master. Once I've carried that out, I beg of you to impart me your knowledge of figure crafting. You'll be excommunicated if you don't. Never will I permit you to call me master again. Zanoba agreed and searched the room, skittering around like a cockroach. Hour passed and only really a letter-sized hole was found in the ceiling with a removable lid, assuming that's where the food was being deposited. He could get out the same way he came in, through the hole, figuring, you know, if he gets a rope, he can kind of throw it down. But there was a stone slab that was sealing the hole, and it had a similar magic circle, thinking that maybe these two magic circles came together. Rudeus says, "Your Highness, don't you have someone under your command with knowledge of barriers?" "I have no one under my command." "No one? No, but even Pax has, like, his own Imperial Guard." "I traded my last of them for the Roxy figure. What a wonderful deal it was." "Looks like you're going to be excommunicated after all." "What?" Rudeus couldn't do that. He needed a helper, so he changed it. "Let's change the earlier requirement. As long as you help me get out, I'll make you my pupil." Zanoba for a while fidgeted and then suddenly said, "Master, just who was the one that created this barrier?" Judging by our conversation, I'm pretty sure it was the 7th Prince Pax." Now that you mention it, Ginger said something along those lines." Though Zanoba didn't really have the details, he was too busy thinking about figurines. It seems as if Zanoba was in connection with Ginger somehow, and she had been making moves in the background. Perhaps she had issues with Pax. I wonder. She must have seen the figurine and sent Zanoba to find him. But why send an undependable person like Zanoba? Rudeus at this point has no clue what Zanoba's capable of. I like that he has literally no clue. "So, Master, that means I just have to do something about Pax, right?" Rudeus says, yeah, I guess that would do the trick." With that, Zanoba thought for a while and then said, "Very well. Please be patient just for a little while then." And Rudeus says, before you do anything, please get someone's input first. Miss Ginger, maybe, or even mine." "Ha ha, Master, you're a worrywart. Rest at ease. You could leave everything to me." With that, Zanoba laughed, ignored Rudeus' warnings, and climbed back up the stairs and left. Rudeus' head was being filled with dread. Like, he screwed something up. Forcing a prince with no servants to move was like shoving a stick into a hornet's nest. Keen sense of foreboding was sweeping through him. However, Rudeus would soon learn that, yes, Zanoba's crazy and he's really strong. And eventually Rudeus would come to realize that everything kind of was decided the moment that Zanoba found out that Rudeus was the creator of that figurine. And with that, that's chapter 5. As I kind of mentioned during this chapter read, I think the most fascinating thing in this entire segment really is the fact that, yes, Zanoba had the box, which is really weird because, again, in the anime adaptation, he never had the box. The only indication that he had about who Rudeus was that he got the statuette. And the statuette was what eventually led him to Rudeus. And I think it's more interesting in the idea that he had a couple pieces of the pie before he even arrived at Rudeus' side. He was already trying to put everything together. Now, again, I think it's more fun in the idea that the Ponsu was really the major link there because of how alike the two were. But even still, getting the statuette, having the box and everything, while it wasn't in the possession of Lilia, which, again, in the anime, he never seen the box until Lilia gave it to him after this whole incident. Additionally, like I said earlier, the other segment that's kind of interesting in this whole thing is really Rudeus realizing that the man god's choices and what he tells Rudeus to do could possibly lead to other deaths. The idea that just because he promises one thing doesn't necessarily that means everything is promised. Just because he says Lilia and Aisha are fine doesn't mean necessarily that Roxy will be fine. Doesn't mean that Rudeus himself will be fine. Rajerd, Edis, everybody around him. And I like that he's finally kind of piecing that together. Which again goes to the whole idea that he could never seem to get like a complete picture from the man god. And yes, technically in chapter 6, we'll get a little bit more of a taste of exactly what Zanoba himself has put together. And I think it's really fascinating to see just how significantly the anime changed things. And again, I will say, first off, I think it still had the same impact in the end. I had the same feeling at the end of this chapter as I did with the anime, and this idea of like, everything's building up to a really bad situation, then suddenly, oh, that's it. Okay, things wrapped up very sudden, very chaotically. But I think the thing that's kind of lost in the anime adaptation is just how much was kind of solved in that room. Like how much Zanoba himself solved the issue. Whereas I think the anime sort of just glosses over the idea of, well, then the king found out and he banished everybody. No, Zanoba legit revealed everything. And he forced his brothers to see it. And again, in anime, we never seen the brothers. The light novel, they were there. So let's jump into chapter 6. Opening up chapter 6, we sort of get Rudeus explaining some things that he didn't know at the time. It's sort of a setup for what's to come in this particular scene so that we as the readers understand what's happening, even though Rudeus himself didn't understand what's happening. And that is, yes, explaining what a blessed child is. At this point in the light novel, We've already seen one blessed child, and that was the girl that Therese was taking care of, the one that the Pope was trying to get rid of. And yes, there's another one that's going to be brought up in Chapter 6. He says, children in this world born with unique abilities that are seen useful are called blessed children. This could be anything from having body that's really, really light or incredibly heavy, being able to freeze anything just by touching it, being able to breathe fire, having poison-tipped fingers, being able to teleport short distances, shoot laser beams out of your eyes. I want to see that one. Nullify every single type of poison, being able to spend an entire day awake without feeling tired. Sounds like I'm a blessed child. And yes, I don't know why he goes out of his way to say yes, apparently there's blessed children that can have sex with hundreds of women at the same time without going soft. And he also goes in explaining there's also cases where somebody's born with an ability, but it's not particularly useful, or even an ability that's unfavorable. And these people are known as cursed children. But he says that that's something we're gonna get into later. So I'm guessing eventually we're gonna get into a cursed child. But it's sort of interesting that he didn't really give any examples, but I would assume that things like being able to spit water, I don't know, something really useless. Maybe the idea of unfavorable would be like being able to only breathe underwater, which would be difficult to live on land. Additionally, we start to get into the princes of Shirone. Again, Shirone, I know. In the Shirone royal palace, there was currently 7 princes. The oldest was 32, and the youngest was, well, he says the youngest doesn't matter, which yes, soon we will know why. In this country, when a prince was born, they were put in command of several imperial guards. The guards were their eyes and ears. They would teach them how to influence the people. If they played their cards right, their number of guards would increase. If not, they would decrease. This was important because when the king passes away, the prince with the most guards would inherit the throne. So that's sort of their way of building power. The more guards you had, the more power you wielded. And this was a tradition in this country. The current first and oldest prince, obviously the one with the most guards, was a bit arrogant, but also had nearly 30 guards under their command. You'd assume the prince with the fewest would be Pax? Scorned by his soldiers, it was true that he had a few under his command. At the moment, 3. At one point, his number was 1. But Pax acquired a contract with a lawless area where the slave market was held. And through that increased by 1. So now he has 2. Now, unfortunately, the one that actually had the fewest number of guards was Zanoba. He had 0. And this is because a few years ago, he had Ginger, which, yes, was the 12th strongest knight in the kingdom, but she was sadly traded away for a certain figurine. Yes, the Roxy figurine. Now, Ginger was initially going to resign. She swore herself to Zanoba. However, Pax took her family hostage, forcing her to become his 3rd guard. Now, yes, this is when we reveal that, yes, in fact, Zanoba was actually a blessed child. He was born with superhuman ability that made him unusually strong. Now, while his power wasn't terribly an exceptional one, the king rejoiced that he was born. Having the possession of a blessed child would be great for his country's future, considering, yes, that they're right on the border of the conflict zone. If there was any battle ahead of them, he would be kind of a beacon. It's also important to know that Zanoba was born from a concubine, and his birth brought joy to her, assuring that she fulfilled her role. Now, that celebration came to a halt when the 4th prince was born. 4th numerically, but the first of the crowned queen. So everything before this was born from concubines. This is the first one the queen herself was birthing. So yes, obviously, this put the entire country into celebration. This baby was a crown jewel, a precious jewel of this country, and thus it was treated as such. A party was thrown in celebration. And amidst of the party, the 3-year-old Zanoba shuffled up to the brother's bed. He reached out and touched his brother, and he said, "How cute. You're just like a doll." Everyone smiled, as Zanoba was fond of dolls. It warmed their heart that he likened his brother to his favorite thing, dolls. However, Zanoba tore his brother's head off as if it was a doll. The party erupted in screams. The king and even the queen were driven mad, condemning Zanoba's mother to exile. However, Zanoba remained in the palace. And this was due to him being, yes, young when it happened, but because he was a blessed child. This is something that the king couldn't discard, even if this was so tragic. He was still an asset to this kingdom. That's just how important blessed children were. However, still, due to the incident, Zanoba's guards were dwindled from 8 to 3. And on top of that, the king ordered him to not be allowed to have more than 3, probably to keep him from ever having enough that he would take the throne. And yes, Zanoba's terrible life didn't end there. When he was 15, while still a doll fanatic, he was at the age where he could finally distinguish the difference between a human and a doll. At this point, he was paired with a wife, daughter of a powerful family that withstood countless attacks from the country of Vista in the conflict zone. Obviously, the king seemed like he was intent on putting Zanoba on the front line in the event of a war with Vista. After the wedding and their first night together, it was discovered that, he beheaded his new wife. The bride's family obviously was extremely angered at their daughter's murder. They rose up in rebellion, but yes, of course, they were quickly suppressed. At this point, the king took 2 more guards away from him and confined him inside of the castle. The king also had Zanoba's favorite doll taken from him, but the soldiers that went to go take that from him ended up with their heads removed. After this whole incident, Zanoba had become known as the head-ripping prince. Of course, everything he had done could not be overlooked, even as a blessed child. He was a madman, and even the king considered execution. But as long as he had a doll, everything was fine. Periodically, they would gift him a doll so that he wouldn't cause any harm. The king seen him as a dangerous weapon that happened to just be the shape of a human. It's pretty bad. He was treated with exceptional caution. Now, cut back to our current time, again establishing that Rudeus didn't know any of this. He had no idea that Zanoba, who he just told, yeah, go take care of Pax, was literally the strongest military power in the Shirone kingdom. Again, Rudeus is still inside of this magic circle. Door opens up. Here comes Zanoba, come marching down the stairs again with this huge grin on. Master, how about this? Now will you take me as your pupil? He held something in his hand. Ow, 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 ow. Please stop it. Please, elder brother, stop! I forgot the voice already. Shut it, Pax. He dragged his brother, Pax Shirone. Blood was dripping from where Zanoba was holding onto his head. But it wasn't Pax's blood. Zanoba was drenched in red. Now, this is another thing that the anime completely skipped. I mean, he was covered in blood because he just killed a bunch of guards. And yet, in the anime, he just kind of just strolls down the walkway, not even a single drip on him. Rudeus at this point had lost his ability to speak. His lighthearted conversation about Zanoba being his pupil had somewhere along the line become a gore fest. Again, Zanoba's covered in blood. Rudeus kind of mentions, yes, a smiling blood-covered face is really only appealing when it's a woman. Going for some sort of anime trope. Probably a yandere. As Zanoba came in, a number of people filed in behind him. First was Ginger with her sword unsheathed. Also, 3 other knights with similar attire. Now, this is where it gets crazy because from behind the knights, you can hear, "Stop it, Zanoba, take your hands off of him." And that's right, Zanoba, get a hold of yourself. Behind the knights were 2 princes in expensive looking clothing. Yes, his elder brothers were there. Everybody was in the room, jammed in there. In the anime, it was just the knights. It was Ginger, and then eventually, like, Rajerd and stuff. But the elder princes were in there, which completely changes everything. Zanoba says, "Elder brother, did you know that Pax took the soldiers' families hostage so that he could force them to do his bidding?" They said, "No. And I do mean soldiers, the ones under the command of our father, not his own personal guards." Zanoba was grinning as he spoke. "It seems he took Ginger's family hostage as well." The brother says, "Is that true?" And Ginger says, "Yes, sir." "Elder brothers, do you remember Roxy?" Yes, she was Pax's tutor. "A king-tier magician who taught our country's soldiers the secrets to facing a magician in battle. A person to whom we owe a great debt to. Didn't our father try to officially invite her to stay at the royal palace? And was it not Pax's foolish actions that sabotaged and destroyed our relationship with her?" The elder brother said, "Well, yes, that's true. Pax was in the wrong, but still you... And yet despite this, see for yourselves, her pupil, Lord Rudeus, is being insulted like this by Pax's doing. The very pupil that Master Roxy said that had even more talent than herself. Lord Rudeus, a true genius." The elder brother says, You always look like you're so bored when you attend the parliament, but you were actually listening. As your brother, this brings me great relief. I was sure you didn't care about what was happening in this country." Zanoba says, "Elder brother, I'm only interested in dolls. All I'm doing now is revealing the truth of Pax's unlawful behavior." I don't know why it's turning into a British accent. Just bear with me. I think most of my voice is turned to British. "Are you an Indian sandwich?" And there's only one reason why I'm doing that. Zanoba never broke his smile. He lifted Pax into the air. "Ow! Lord Rudeus is a wonderfully skilled, unsurpassable figurine maker. I could not forgive someone like that from being used as a pawn for Pax's revenge scheme. Pax is sitting there screaming about his head nearly breaking open. Elder brother, if you decide to take Pax's side in this, I will act out. The knight's and the princess's faces all went pale. I'm not asking for anything difficult. I just want to save this figurine maker, and Pax's bad behavior is inhibiting my ability to do that. The elder brother says, but without Pax, the slave market... Elder brother... Please don't make me say it again. Your young brother's head is about to be torn off. Zanoba finally stopped smiling. Rudeus really wasn't sure what was going on. He was confused that if he said that as a metaphor or if he actually meant it. All he knew is that Zanoba was commanding the situation, so in his own mind, he was actually cheering him on. Pax starts screaming, No, Ginger, save me. Don't you care what happened to your family? Ginger says, my family? They were saved by Master Reserve last night. Again, like what? This is already resolved in the night novel. At this point, that was already resolved. Pax is like, what? Rudeus was shocked as well. Apparently, Reserve was working behind the scenes, which was technically normal for him, just saving lives. Now you see where things stand, elder brothers. I have the least authority amongst the princes, and that's why I've come to enlist your help. If you should refuse, I will act out with every ounce of my strength I possess. From this distance, I could take one of you, perhaps both of your heads, and rip them off. Though I'm sure the court magicians would burn me alive afterwards. The elder brother says, okay, fine. We'll do as you ask. Be sure you look into this thoroughly, yes? Also, that girl who created all this fuss 2 years ago, Lilia, is being held somewhere captive in this castle. I'd like you to secure her as well. Yes, of course. I'll be sure to let Father know too. Again, Rudeus didn't know that Zanoba was a blessed child. Instead, he assumed that he was just super confident. And he really honestly felt it really odd that these two princes were so desperately defending Pax. But yes, he was wrong. These guys were terrified of Zanoba. The kind of terror that you face when a bomb is just about to explode. Even after Rudeus was released, he was confused. Like, what the hell happened? Dumbstruck that Pax was being carried off. Lilia was released, and the whole issue just came to a conclusion. Again, that was kind of the feeling I got from the anime, and equally here. It's just this whole idea that, what is happening here? Rudeus is stuck. Okay, obviously Eris and Reserve are going to show up and save him, which, yes, technically the anime sort of did. They actually had them there. But in the light novel, it was literally just like these random people he met. And Zanoba he just randomly met. And it's like the entire prince system of this entire Shirone kingdom just had a big fight, a brawl in front of him. It was crazy. It's super chaotic. And again, the two elder brothers were there. The two princes. Zanoba was there. Pax, 4 princes of this kingdom were in that room, plus the 3 guards, including Ginger. And the crap just hit the fan because Zanoba is so nuts, and he's a blessed child that everybody's terrified of. It's really interesting. At this point, we cut to several days later, and Rudeus has kind of figured out everything that had happened while he was stuck in that prison. To break down what happened with Lilia, she was detained, suspected of being a spy for a foreign leader. When she was interrogated, she invoked the name of Paul and Roxy, which kept her out of prison, but it didn't dispel the suspicion around her completely. Instead, she was confined in the palace. When info about the displacement finally reached Shirone Kingdom, it seems as if she was going to be released. However, Pax intervened and manipulated the flow of information, which meant that Lilia and Aisha was forced to remain there. After Roxy had finally fled the castle, Pax established a contact with the slave markets. Through them, he hired a private army. Then he took some of his father's soldiers' families hostage and forced them under obedience. Those soldiers then searched the slums in secrecy, where they finally discovered where the hostages were being kept. However, they couldn't act. They were too heavily guarded. They were forced to let days slip by. And that's when Aisha escaped. Pax gave orders to pursue her. After Rudeus had saved Aisha, this tipped off the soldiers that Roxy's pupil was in the area. So they began to devise a plan. First, and here's the answer to the question we had a couple chapters ago. First, they started a fight in the slave markets, which threw it into chaos. They then used the fact that Aisha had been kidnapped by a mysterious man to get Pax's private army moving. After that, they plan on explaining the circumstances to Rudeus and ask him for assistance in rescuing the hostages. Rudeus would help them attack the place where the hostages were being held during the time that its security was weakened. And in return, they would help him save Lilia. However, that didn't happen because Rudeus sent a letter to Roxy. He was then lured to come to be confined by Pax. Obviously, if he had waited and not sent the letter, Rudeus would have been able to work with the soldiers, lure him into a trap instead. Thank you, man god. Yes, Rudeus immediately thinks, well, maybe the man God intended for me to save Aisha and then write the letter to Roxy, which I would answer, nope. Nope, he wanted all this to happen. I think most people could probably assume that the whole reason for this whole thing the man God had him do this for was probably to get Zanoba out of there. Or maybe, I guess technically get rid of Pax. I mean, that could be a possibility too, but yes, even me, I'm more leaning towards the idea that Zanoba was needed to be friended. Instead, when the soldiers came to the inn to see Rudeus, they end up finding Rajerd. And yes, Rajerd immediately jumped to rescuing them, which, yes, again, anime. I don't know why Rajerd was actually hesitating in the anime. He immediately is like, all right, I'll slay the hostages. But yes, after that whole incident, Rajerd also intended to charge the castle. But the soldiers kind of told him, no, look, we'll handle it. We'll handle it. But yes, Rajerd wouldn't listen. Sadly, throughout this whole incident, Ginger wasn't made aware of anything. The soldiers were too afraid of telling her because they were afraid that she would then tip off Pax because, again, her family's in danger. Even still, they didn't have ill will towards her. They still saved her family. Ginger, feeling that she had her chance to finally move, she gave the figurine of Rajerd to Zanoba. She kind of calculated that he might see Rudeus as a valuable ally to himself. Like I mentioned earlier, Ginger still swore allegiance to Zanoba. And yes, obviously Rudeus is questioning at this point, why would she care to be faithful to somebody that traded her off for a figurine? He kind of assumes there's some sort of story there, which, yeah, I would hope to learn eventually. Cut to the day of the whole incident. Zanoba killed 2 of Pax's Imperial guards before taking Pax hostage. And of course, with that, the soldiers never got to carry out their last steps of their plan. The incident instead just came to a surprising close. Again, it kind of plays in that whole idea of how chaotic this was. Like, everybody had their move they were making. Ginger, the soldiers, the Imperial guards, they're being controlled. Pax, Zanoba, Rudeus even trying something, Rajerd and Edis, everybody kind of had their own plan, and while some of them met, the end was just kind of this chaotic mess. After this whole incident came to light, the king issued his orders. Pax was to be banished from the country, even if it was unfortunate that he'd be losing his contacts to the slave market. However, Pax's actions set a terrible precedence, kidnapping soldiers' families and family of one of his Imperial guards. On top of that, he took hostage a magician like Rudeus that could have joined the royal family. And yes, technically a hostage that was to draw in Roxy so that he could assault and kill her. To maintain appearances, they claimed Pax was being sent to study abroad. In reality, he was being sent to the King Dragon realm to be kept as a hostage, one whose death would be inconsequential. As for Zanoba, he was also being banished under the public claim of studying abroad. His banishment was proposed by the first and second princes, who claimed that he was partly at fault for all this. Honestly, they just feared him. And yes, the king was reluctant to let him go, but he knew that dolls could no longer be reliable to rein him in. He was tired of all the problems that was caused by Zanoba. We then find out that Lilia was released, although some still claim that she was a spy. To curry favor with Pax, Lilia had apparently been gathering information behind the scenes, which Rudeus really thought was amazing even though she was under captivity. Still, in order to silence those claims, she was to be escorted all the way to Paul. Not Ashra Kingdom, but Paul. This made sense because there was really nothing to send her to in Ashra Kingdom. Paul currently had stronger ties in the holy country of Milis. It was better that she stayed there. Still, Rudeus kind of feared that she would be killed, like in order to keep her silent. But Ginger volunteered to go with her for protection. This was under the command of Zanoba himself, to protect his master's family. Yes, Rudeus, his master's family. With her, there was some soldiers whom Rajerd had saved their families. So this sort of put Rudeus' mind at ease. As for Rudeus himself, yes, the king personally invited him to stay in the region. Of course. Offering to prepare him a place as a court magician. Given the king's tone, he knew that he was just asking the impossible. Kind of just sighed after he said it. Rudeus obviously refused him. When he did, the king sighed again and told him he could leave. That's it. No apology from the king. That's just how the royal family was. They don't apologize. The beast folk were a lot more honorable in that respect. As Rudeus was leaving, Zanoba obviously clung to him and was in tears. Master, you're truly going to leave? Are you truly going to leave your pupil behind? Sorry, I have to hurry on my journey. Then could you at least make me a figurine before you go? Those take a lot of time to make, so I'm afraid I can't. Zanoba was crushed and was clinging onto him, wailing in anguish. Rudeus was on the edge, fearing that he could end up losing his head. He was grateful, but at the same time, he was terrified of this dude. Rudeus says, okay, if we happen to meet again, I'll teach you how to make one of the figurines from scratch. How does that sound? What? No, I mean, are you sure? Isn't that a top secret skill of your trade? What kind of pupil would you be if I didn't teach you anything? Zanoba, in excitement, threw him up in the air and slammed his head against the ceiling and yelled, "Oh no, Ginger! Healing magic! Healing magic!" Ginger healed his wounds. Zanoba was pale that he nearly killed his master. He was so relieved when Rudeus rose again alive. Rudeus considered at this point to excommunicate him, but again, he feared losing his head. "All right, master, stay safe. I don't know where I'll be shipped to, but I have a feeling I'll eventually run into you again." That's very ominous. Yeah, you too. Zanoba was sobbing as he watched Rudeus go. Ginger was watching the two of them and crying too. Again, there's a story there. There's gotta be a story there. There's gotta be a story there. I need the Ginger and Zanoba story. I'm wondering if that's in this volume or not. Closing up the chapter, we see them departing from Shirone. Lillian Aisha at this point is saved and being sent to Paul. Pax was banished. Rudeus gained a new pupil in the form of Zanoba. Now, because Rudeus thinks that he didn't follow the man god's advice perfectly, he believes things were kind of rough. But still, in the end, this kind of ended in the best way possible. Though he still felt as if he was dancing in the man god's palms. But again, everything ended well. Lily and Aisha were in good health. Zanoba had no ill feelings towards him. Pax probably hated him, but he was being booted with no pawns to manipulate. Because of this, Rudeus felt that he could probably put more trust in the man god. No. A con artist would only be duping people after they'd proven themselves successful once. He would still exercise caution until he was certain he was trustworthy. Still, a promise was a promise. The next time they met, he wouldn't be hostile. And that's it. That's chapter 6. Like I said, really interesting. A very different perspective of everything that happened during that whole incident. And I loved getting a little bit more insight into, yes, Ginger and Zanoba. And like I said before, this whole idea of just how much of the situation Zanoba took control of. Like, he literally took control of the situation. And technically, yes, I don't even remember them even mentioning the king was even offering Rudeus a place there. It really emphasized this idea of incredible mages. These countries want it. These kingdoms want as many court magicians as possible. If you're really good at magic, they want you at their side. Again, mages are technically sort of rare in this world. I think the only thing they've kind of mentioned that was a little bit more rare was a healer. But for the most part, it's like healer, mage, everything else. So again, having somebody extremely skilled and somebody more skilled than Roxy. Again, this entire kingdom was told by Roxy, my pupil, Rudeus, is much more powerful than I am. Much more skilled. And so, if they've been hearing Roxy praise him the entire time while she was helping the soldiers, master their art and all this other stuff that was happening in the kingdom. And yes, technically that Roxy was a demon, and yet she was still treasured by this kingdom because she was powerful. Her praising Rudeus, they wanted him. And yes, I think the king obviously acknowledges this kid ain't going to stay here, but I'll try. But still, it's like Rudeus had an opportunity there to live the high life for a while, at least until Shirone Kingdom gets destroyed, which I'm assuming is going to happen eventually. Again, learning a little bit more about the Blessed Child thing, I think, again, we sort of touched a little bit on it when I think Aisha was explaining it to Edis. But that's kind of been the one thing that I've been kind of fascinated by. I don't even think we ever mentioned what the Blessed Child did back at Millis. The Blessed Child that Therese was taking care of. I don't think they ever mentioned what her ability was, or if she's even alive at this point. But I'll be curious over time if we do run into some other Blessed Childs. And I think when I first was watching the series, my assumption right off the bat was, oh man, Blessed Childs are totally going to be isekais. They weren't. Or at least we know of so far. I mean, they could be isekais that just don't have their memories, but still, would that even matter to even mention? But I'll be curious over time if we do have some other Blessed Childs that are kind of brought up. And, as I kind of mentioned, Cursed Childs. When are we going to actually run into some Cursed Childs? Or have we already run into Cursed Childs? I also did get a little bit of a kick of the idea that they never showed Ginger there when they went to part ways in the anime. Which, yes, technically Ginger goes with them as they go towards Paul. They're going to travel together for a while, by the way. They'll eventually get to this point where they're going to have to split. One road leads off towards Millis, and the other road's going to lead off to Asra. But yes, the entire journey, Ginger's going to be with them. And it was kind of funny that you never seen Ginger in the anime. I think you might have seen maybe the side of her thigh or something as she was walking off the screen after a cut, but it still wasn't her. It didn't indicate it. But anyhow, that is Volume 6, Chapters 5 and 6. Hope you guys enjoyed this video as always. If you did, make sure to hit that like button down below and leave me a comment. Let me know what you thought of this whole segment. What was your favorite segment about it? Or again, just leave me a comment just to help out the algorithms. Additionally, if you're new to the channel, make sure that subscribe button so you get all my content. I do news, reviews, first impressions, top list. If it's anime, it's pretty much here. Additionally, if you like my content and you want to support the channel more, we have a Patreon link, a tips link, and a super thanks button down below. We also have a join button there where you can be a member of the channel, and it helps support us out, and you get some cute little speed chat emotes. Additionally, a special thanks to all those that are dropping by for the premiere. Love chatting with you guys. But until the next Mushoku Mondays, y'all take care.